Thank you for joining us today. Caroline Cunha is with us today on the Dr. Nobody podcast, and we're going to have an interesting discussion today about imposter syndrome. But before we do, I want her to read her own bio. Let's talk about it.
Hi, Dr. Nobody. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to talk to you and your listeners. So I am Caroline Cunha, and I was born in São Paulo, Brazil, about 10,000 miles from this very glowy New York. And I was actually born and raised in a very humble neighborhood. But where my parents had limited resource, they really had the same amount of dream, intellectual curiosity, savviness, and drive. And the dreams was for me and my brother. My mom really installed in the two of us this real desire of being intellectually curious, but more important, to be independent. And she knew that the cornerstone to get to that is to be educated. And obviously, the way for her to do that is to put us through formal education. But education for her, it was this this desire to never stop learning. So since I graduated from marketing and advertising in a college, a very prestigious college in Brazil called Mackenzie University, I came to the U.S. because I knew gaining English fluency was key to getting ahead in my country or any place else in the world. So I came here. I didn't have much money, and I took jobs from nanny and some under the table, just cash money. But I always had my eyes in big ad agencies because that was my degree and that's what I want to do. And that was what I was passionate. So 20 years later, I have been lucky enough to work in the biggest ad agencies in the world. I'll obviously stationed in New York, our house in New York. And specifically in the pharmaceutical industry. So 15 of this 20 years in advertising, I have spent it here. The key has really, for me, has what my mom really wanted to do was that you have to believe in yourself before anyone believes in you. And that was the key to really have a better life than she had. She came from a very humble background. So did my dad. So all they wanted was for us to have a better life. And they succeeded. Here I am in a big agency in New York. And my brother is just as a big agency in New Zealand. So I think she did a good job.
You guys both succeeded pretty well. And I consider New Zealand's pretty awesome too.
Oh, New Zealand is amazing. So right now we are like in competitive agencies, right? I'm in IPG and he's in Publicis. But while I think I got the better network, he definitely got a really fantastic living in New Zealand. It's a really beautiful country, and it's the people are amazing. So that's my story.
Yeah, I just want to ask you a couple questions about your story because it's really interesting. So how did you know that you wanted to get a degree in marketing and advertising? Like, how do you choose that? Because personally for me, I didn't learn about that until after I did my PhD, which was when I was 28, 29, whatever it was. So many years later, I was like, oh, this is pretty awesome. How did you discover it?
I know, right? So I was always an advertiser, and I have been an advertiser since I was, I guess, 18, 19. I knew that I wanted to do communications, but I was not really sure which area of communication. I was always a very expressive person. But once again, I made decisions really based on what my family could afford. So I really wanted to be an actress. And I knew, like in Brazil, if I was an actress, I was not going to make any money, right? And I was not going to be able to fulfill that dream of having a better life than my parents. So from all the colleges I applied, the hardest one to get was the one that I applied for drama. Almost like knowing that I wasn't going to be accepted because Like I had so much competition. So the other schools, I knew I needed to select the best schools if I was going to really be able to succeed. But the best schools are also the most expensive, with exception of one, which is the school I graduated in. Today, actually, it's highly expensive. But when I was in Brazil, it had a very important tax break that made it more affordable to other people. It was highly competitive. So I looked at the communication majors, and they didn't have journalism, which was my fallback. I was like, damn, I'm going to have to choose what is closest to it, because that's the college I can afford, my family can afford. So
Yeah.
they had advertising and marketing. And I didn't know very much about it. But I knew that it was communications and it was close to journalism. I did apply to other two schools, and I applied to journalism, and I was accepted to all the other ones, with exception of the drama school. And it was and the decision was what I can afford, what my family can afford, and we are not going to be strapped, because I know education was very important for my mom, and if I wanted the most expensive school, she was going to bend backwards to pay. But I didn't want to put her in that position, so I went to Mackenzie University, which was the school that we could afford. And in the first year, I quite enjoy, actually. And in Brazil, it's a little bit different than in the US. In the US, you take 2 years of general ed. I can tell you guys get it easy. In Brazil, we got technical classes from freshman year. So I remember like having heavy duty semiotics class, and that's what I think it made me really to fall in love with advertising. We got these classes, like, for example, the science of communication and semiotics, which are like, I talk to my colleagues, advertisers, very few understand semiotics, right? But I had those
know
classes.
What that is.
Well, I can't quite explain as well, but it was a long time ago. But
Okay.
it's really like this is the foundation of science, of communications, right? You have, because I learned in Portuguese, it's going to be very hard for me to translate, but you're going to have the sign and the receiver and the messages that are sent in between, and the noises that can get into the way of this message from the sign to the receiver. So I just remember being fascinated. And while I can't explain semiotics anymore, I can see it in action when I watch a movie, when we make decisions on like what type of subliminal science to put it in an ad lob in the work that we do in the agency, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe we put it like we have a client where there was a whole discussion about the oh my God, what was the prop? I can't quite remember the name of the prop, but it was a whole, like the props that we put it in the ads, right? That's our parasemiotics. And we do now it's instinct for us being in this industry for such a long time. But in the beginning, it wasn't, right? In the beginning, when you are 18-year-old self and you don't know anything and how to choose a prop, and you're learning about the foundations of the ad of the communications, is very cool. So long story short, you ask me how I chose advertising. I chose advertising in that year, right? I went into this school because it's what I could afford. And I, in that very first year, was having fun. I was like, wow, I can make this a real career. And that's what it has been for a long time, advertising.
So, yeah. So it's interesting. You had to make a choice based on how much you could afford. And to you, how hard was that for you personally as a student, like an incoming student? Like, do you remember how you felt about that, or how you think about it retrospectively now?
It was because financial frugality was part of our lives since the day I was born. It wasn't it was like, obviously, I'm going to make the most financial choice, the best financial choice, that for my family that is not going to overburden. So it wasn't something that really upset me. But it was something that I needed to be conscious. And I was always very grateful that I could do that. And I'm going to tell you, like, now, like, so many years has passed and I don't have a student debt. And I came to master's in the state as well, and I don't have a student debt from that, but I don't have a student debt because of my parents. Not only they pay for my undergrad education, but because of what they taught me during the undergrad and how they're paying for that school, it really equipped me to go through master's through a grad degree in the United States and not owning any money, right? So it was really a wonderful lesson. That's why, like, I find college education, and while there is so many people talk about formal education, how can be wasteful, I understand in part why people say that, but formal education is not the degree you get, but the lessons you learn in those years, right? And that's exactly for me, like, you learn how to see people that are very different than you, and you learn how to be exposed to different ideas, and you learn how to pay for college, which is a very expensive investment that you make in yourself. So I didn't think very much of it. I was just very grateful at that time.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with college, and I ended up going to Kane University because it was the
Mm-hmm.
cheapest school in New Jersey. But what I took from it was significantly more what it ended up
Yes,
being worth, right? And I think that's
exactly.
exactly what you're saying is it doesn't matter where you go, it's what you take out of it. So if you don't take
Exactly.
advantage on everything that's around you and what you could do and the opportunities that are provided you there, then you're really just going there just to go there and doing whatever you have to do to finish. But that's not the
Exactly.
goal every time. It's what you take out of it.
Yeah.
And when you said it, I just thought I had like flashbacks to when I was in school, and I was like, yeah, I totally, every time I saw an opportunity for something science related, bam, I was in there. I took advantage. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that with
Yeah.
us. Um, you mentioned to me before about what your mother instilled in you in terms of like her saying. You want to talk about it real quick?
Sure. So, mom said, like, well, mom had many sayings. One of them, it was like, be an independent thinker and you will be independent forever. Which was one of those things, like, for a woman in Brazil, she was really trying to say is like, don't wait for a husband, which was
That's fair.
awesome because I never did, right?
Mhm.
And I'm so glad for her for this. So that be but if you take that and to be much bigger than it is, be an independent thinker, and you're gonna always be independent. It's not only financially, but also emotionally and intellectually, right? There's real power in being an independent person, an independent thinker. That means you're always questioning and you're always educating and pushing the envelope of your own beliefs. I think that's the first thing. But she also said, she used to say another thing is like, in order to succeed, you have to believe in yourself before everybody else believe in you. That was also something that she used to say a lot, which is
Wow.
very true, right? Like, so
Yeah.
how can you be confident and defend a specific point of view because you're an independent thinker if you don't believe in that point of view yourself? You're not going to convince anyone. So, Mama was very wise, and she instilled all she wanted was for us to have a better life and that she had herself. And because she was so wise and she wanted so much for us, that's why she always challenged us to think about something different, like be an independent thinker. So you're going to be independent forever is very different for a little girl in Sao Paulo in a very patriarchal society, to be an independent thinker, right? But also, like, you have to believe in yourself if anybody else is going to believe in you. And that goes for anything from like going on a date to going on an interview. All those things are true.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah. I gotta say that like my dad also instilled that, definitely not those kind of wise words, but basically just saying he just wanted us to do better than him. My dad was just a truck driver. We didn't have money either. And he just always tried to give us the opportunities we can have. And going to college was one of them. And I definitely didn't want
Yeah.
to go to college, but he really pushed it. And then here we are doing this
So,
now.
Dr. Nobody went from not wanting to go to college from holding a PhD. That's a lot of changes.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened in between that time, but that's for a different episode. But I want to talk about now so marketing and advertising might not be for everyone, and
No.
and that's definitely something people have heard of, but they don't really understand it. And I personally, when I joined marketing and advertising world, I had no idea what it was. I just know when I see commercials for drugs, they always look so happy, and then they ramble off some stuff and how deadly it is, and then it was like, but take it because it's great. So is that exactly what we do?
What we do is so much more complicated than that.
Why don't you give the listeners like a quick rundown of what you do, what your title, what does it mean, and what marketing advertising is?
So I am a senior vice president of strategy for IPG Health, and the fancy title just means that I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a little bit more experience. I work for IPG Health, and we do advertising for pharmaceutical companies. In my role as a strategic planner, I think about, I have two main roles. I give recommendations that really push the health of the brand to different places, even if sometimes that means setting clients, because sometimes they are so close to their brand that they don't see what is the best way forward.
The brand is the drug, right?
That's a very good point. Thank you. Yes, the brand is the drug. So when you see a commercial that says, take this brand, and the name is a brand, right? But brands, it's not only the pharmaceutical industry that have brands. Brands exist everywhere. Coca-Cola is a brand. Apple is a brand. And, like the drink you drink, the coffee you drink, Starbucks, they are brands. And brands are very valuable assets for companies. So the pharmaceutical industry have a product that they take that compound and they transform that compound into a brand. And the main existence of a brand is to really summarize what the benefits, emotional, functional, of that product will mean for this person's life. So the advices we bring is to really make that brand as valuable as possible. And a way to do that is to understand what is happening in the marketplace, as like, what are the competitors of the brand, but I also understand how the doctors and patients are making decisions about the condition that brand dash product can solve, right? So many of the decisions patients and HCPs make many times are not even conscious. They think that they're making decisions for one reason, but they're really making decisions for a different reason. So a lot of what we do is understanding the science of decision making and how that influences the health of a brand. So I think that's the best summary like I can really give, like in 10, 15 seconds from what we do. But to your question, it's not for everyone. No, it's not. The beauty of advertising is that is highly creative, right? And if you like creativity, it can be like it can be really energizing. But there is a dark side of advertising, which is it's a little bit of an art that is really the word I'm looking for is productized, right? Advertising is a product. So, but it's different than if you buy Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola has a very specific formula. You put one ingredient, one another ingredient, then boom, you got your Coca-Cola the same every single time. Mm-hmm. Or a pharmaceutical, there is a recipe that goes there. Or even like in science, many times you put like a recipe together and you know what you're going to get at the end. That's not really the case in advertising, right? And it is a little bit of an art as people come in and give their opinion. But there is many times there isn't how to know if that is really the right way to go or not, unless it's based in your experience, right? And based on how the books that you have read for a million years. And so bringing that balance of art and science can be nerve-wracking, especially because you're creative, you're also in a very emotionally charged industry. So it's all these recipes, creativity is emotionally charged, it's a lot of opinions. And sometimes your craft and what you bring to the table can get lost. And that can really be a catalyst to your imposter syndrome, right? Which is really what we want to talk about it today. Because it's not engineering, it's not exact science where you put a 2 + 2 = 4. A lot of it is based on your experience, and it is based on your knowledge, like of the books you've read and the case studies that you've seen, and you make assessment of how that can solve the problem you're trying to solve. But once again, because it's not exact science, and when it's challenged over and over again, that really affects your confidence in how to deliver the right answer. And it comes like you already go shaky, right? If you're in a place where you never saw a problem before, right? Like I really take the hat for all the marketers that are commercializing COVID drugs, vaccines, because that industry of COVID-related products, right? Tests, vaccines, antivirals, monoclonal antibodies, like nobody has ever gone to that space. So doing anything in that space is very nerve-wracking because you've never done it before. So you have to rely on your expertise. And for a person that suffers from imposter syndrome, that can be their worst nightmare, because really navigating that unknown space with confidence and really embracing your vulnerability is incredibly testing. So, yeah.
When I joined advertising, I didn't know what role brand strategists had. Like I didn't really actually I didn't even know my own role itself. So like I feel like a lot of the role is evolved based on like how you're saying your own experience, and the more drugs you start advertising and marketing, the more experience you get, even if it's a totally different disease state.
Yes.
So meaning like cancer, and then you're marketing a heart drug. It translates. Yes, the science is different, the drug is different, but the overall idea is still the same, and those ideas can translate back and forth. And to your point, you have your high title not just because you've done it for a very long time, it's because you've deservingly got to that point in your career because you've managed to succeed every time when these challenges come to you, right?
I won't say that I succeeded every time, but I learned from every time I didn't succeed.
Okay.
Right. So I succeeded more than I have not. But I never a loss of whatever that is, right? A loss of a recommendation or a wrong recommendation for granted. And I always took that as a learning opportunity. But yeah, it it also helped that I've been lucky enough to have had a very diverse set of experience. I have colleagues that they are the oncologist planner, right? And they, or others that are the diabetes planner. And that's what they've done most of their lives. It's very common in oncology and it's very common in diabetes. I I cannot even say that I didn't want to do that. It just didn't happen like that for me. And I'm actually quite grateful because the diversity of different brands experiences, different agencies, different targets. And by targets, I mean the people that we're actually communicating, really create this immense repository of experience that I can draw from and trying to learn from that situation and apply to a new client or to a new situation, right? And I think that's the main thing for me is like never stop learning. I've really never stopped learning. And that's what I tell to the teams that I manage, right? The people that work for me is like, you have to be curious all the time. Yeah. And it's like you have to want to go to the books. And I never I'm telling the teams all the books that I read, and it's on them if they read or not. They're the owners of their own learning, right? But it's really key for me that I am empowering the team to be as curious and have the same knowledge that I do. So for me, that's key for you to try to really fight that imposter syndrome is trying to learn as much as you can.
I have so many follow-up questions, but I don't want to belabor the different issues. But I guess one thing I want to understand and pass through to the listeners is your job, you actively have to be learning because
yes.
everything changes constantly. Is that correct?
Every day. Like, it's funny you ask that, Dr. Nobody. I was literally in the shower yesterday dreaming for retirement. And listen, I am 20 years away from retirement. Like thinking about like having a drink in my retirement dining room and thinking about what is the thing about advertising that is happening this day that I'm so out of touch. But it changes every day. And it's hard to stay on top of it. And I just came to acceptance that I'm not going to know everything, that it changes all the time, right? So I made a decision that I'm going to try to be as good as I am in a handful of things, as good as I can in a handful of things.
But that's why you have a team, right?
That's why I have a team, and I try to get very different people than me. And I never been wrong about getting people that obviously I'm looking for similar traits like curiosity, hardworking, proactiveness, independent thinker, right? So those are really universal traits that the team has. But what they're good at as it comes to the craft and the skill, right? I'm like, if there is somebody that feels more comfortable in the high science brands versus the more consumerish brands, I wanted them all because they complement my skill differently. There is one of our team members that are very good in the customer experience strategy, and which is something that I am not that good at. So I love that he's there because he can continue bringing new knowledge to the team. But yeah, it's hard to be up to date to what is happening, and there it's for me is a little bit like you got to be up to date in advertising. Obviously, you got to be up to date with the news in pharmaceuticals, in technology, and in business, right? So it's really an array of in culture. Like, I think I can go on and on and on, right? Because everything influences people in people's decision making, right? And in the meantime, we're also serving pharmaceutical clients that are in to try to maximize their profits, but also do good to people. So how do we balance those two things?
Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile to have you back on and then me put on my medical director hat as your partner and help people understand that in advertising world, it's a different world, and just being in pharmaceuticals and selling drugs, people just take this cognition of like it's bad, it's evil, you're doing the wrong things or things are happening, whatever. But that's not true. We are in the trenches, especially with these COVID stuff and different new drugs, new technologies that people are scared of. But it's our job to make them comfortable with that, right?
Yes. For a while, I thought, like, I was very conflicted, right? When I came to the States, like a million years ago, I had a mentor. His name was Mitch Collisair. And Mitch was this really wise person that I love him so much. And he worked for Pharmacia before Pharmacia was bought by Pfizer. He worked for Pfizer. So he had a long career in pharmaceuticals. And because he was mentoring me, he was really insisting that I would apply for the pharma industry. And I remember having this conversation with him. This was like a while, like we're talking about many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the Minister of Health in Brazil was breaking the patent of some HIV drugs. And because he wanted to distribute those drugs in the public health system to try to contain the HIV epidemics. And being a young, naive person at the time, I thought, good for him, like, this is awesome. We're going to save lives. And it's obviously the cause is amazing. And I was talking to him, and he, being a pharma veteran, he made a really good point, which is like, if pharma industry doesn't have the financial incentives to make money of selling the drugs, there will never be innovation. So the drug that the health minister is trying to break the patent in Brazil will never see the light of day if the pharmaceutical company was as incentivized to make a profit out of it. So obviously, needless to say, he really was against the whole patent breaking. But that didn't sit right with me, right? And then fast forward, now here I am. I'm a senior strategist doing the devil's work. Let's put it between quotation because it's not the devil's work, right? And it is actually, I find, rewarding in a way to be able to see the innovations of pharmaceuticals, right? Listen, the pharmaceutical industry does terrible things. Obviously, they do. Do they need to charge $500 for insulin pen? No, they do not. Insulin has been in the market for almost 100 years. On the other hand, there is this other drug for SMA, which is genetic disease that little babies have. And it's cost $2.4 million.
Oh, who has that kind of money?
Right. Well, obviously, no person is paying. It's the insurance people that are paying. And I didn't work on that drug at all, but it's gene therapy. The complications of it's almost a procedure, right? It's like gene therapy for those people that I know and understand. It's like you take a sample of tissue from a person, you modify in the lab, you bring it back and inject back in the person. It's highly complicated, right? And it's highly expensive. I don't even know how many years they invested in research that, but I can tell you that gene therapy has been in research for 40 years. So it took 40 years of no money for them to come up with a drug that probably like a very small number of babies in the world have it. So for the continuation of innovation, the pharma industry needs to find a way, continue the money the money coming in for the innovation to continue coming in, right?
Correct,
So so this idea now looking back at that conversation in the HIV with Mitch, like, obviously it's not cool to break innovation patents, right? I think as we move forward, I hope that there is a better balance where innovation and public health are working together for a better balance. But I really moved from this place of feeling like I'm doing the devil's work, and I don't feel bad anymore when somebody tells me I am doing the devil's work, because I'm not. Like I hear conversations from patients in Brazil, right, and that they don't know the treatment options that they have, or women in Brazil that wanted to get an IUD and their doctors refuse to give them an IUD, or they don't even know the names of the IUDs. And this only happens in Brazil because advertising can be there for consumers of pharmaceuticals. What we can do here, right? So there is a real positive side to the work we do.
No, totally. And that's why I think it needs another episode to go deeper into it. Because one, I joined marketing advertising because that's how it was sold to me as well. That you're gonna learn constantly, you're gonna be challenged constantly. And that's how my mind is. It just needs to be challenged. If not, I get bored and I start buying things. And those buying things just lead to a very bad rabbit hole. So yeah, I need to be controlled by being distracted in a different way. Um, but yeah, I think it's really interesting the different paths that people can take, and knowing new paths like marketing advertising is novel to them, and an opportunity to challenge, to have bring in people to be challenged in a new way that they never thought they could. Because at least for PhDs, it's just academia, and if you don't join academia, you're like shunned.
You
It's
sold
just
your
how it is.
soul.
Yeah, and it's a real thing. It really, I did experience that um throughout my PhD, knowing that I was never intending to do academia ever from the beginning. But um I digress now. So I want to talk about, you keep bringing up imposter syndrome. So in my previous episode, before I talked about to my listeners about imposter syndrome and my imposter syndrome, which stemmed from, really, I felt it during my PhD. I'm pretty sure I felt it before then. I just didn't recognize it. And just like other mental issues that people have, they're not aware of it. And I think imposter syndrome is definitely one that people hear about it. They see it in movies, maybe people joke around, but it really affects people a lot. And I know I wasn't the only one in my PhD program that suffered from imposter syndrome. I know at our current agency, I am definitely not the only one suffering from imposter syndrome. If you could first, in your own words, how would you define imposter syndrome to our listeners? They got the dictionary definition in the previous episode, but I just want to hear it from your words so that they can hear it in a different way.
For sure. For me, it's like this constant innate feeling that you believe you're not good enough to be where you are, right? You don't belong to that conversation. You don't belong to this organization. You don't belong to the subject. You're not good enough to solve this problem. And as a strategist, I deal with problems all day long. That's all I do, is solve problems, right?
Yeah.
And when you're being bombarded with, like, you have to know the right question to ask. There is no freaking formula to what is the right question to ask. Is instinct. And that's what I was saying a few minutes ago about this dark side of marketing, which is like, it's not exact science. It's like this thing that comes from inside. So for me, imposter syndrome is this thing that you feel like you don't belong there. It doesn't matter how educated, how smart, how many brands you turn around, how many like boardrooms you've been, how many CEOs and CMOs you have talked to. Is that feeling that you still don't have what it takes to solve that problem at hand. And for a woman with an accent, this is quite pervasive, right? Because I'm constantly thinking about did I use the smartest word I could use to make my point? Now I'm insecure.
Mhm.
Now, oh my God, now I'm gonna be called out because I don't belong here. So yes, imposter syndrome is very insidious.
So I'll give an example of my a quick example of imposter syndrome in my PhD, and then I want to hear your example. So for me, my whole life, even when I was working in the bakery and ShopRite as my first job, I always wanted to find how to do that job. Like, how do I do it the best I can? And then working at the pharmacy and all my other jobs that came after, I always bought books on how to do it. I mean, even for podcasting, I bought books how to
I
do
believe you.
podcasting. Yeah, I have them in front of me. So there's just like this need in my mind that I need to know how to do this, because if not, I'm going to fail, and people are going to know, and they're going to call me out, and I'm scared of that. That's It's the fear of being called out for me, of being, hey, Carlos, Dr. Nobody, you don't really know what you're doing here. What's going on? What's, explain to me. So I still live that with that fear, even in our agency, in my job, and talking to clients, just having, even the clients are the worst because they're your boss. Essentially, they're the ones
Yeah,
who are paying you to do your job. So if a client was to say something, it would devastate me even worse than if my personal boss would. So that's my experience, and it still lingers. Imposter syndrome, I feel like, never goes away. Maybe
yeah.
at a lower level, but it's just this nagging feeling that just it sucks.
Yeah, it's definitely not pleasant, and I think your experience of educating yourself as much as you can is something that I experience, especially as a planner, right? Because when you think about, I have a problem, and where do I find the solution? I don't know. In the market, in the target, in the company, in the product, in the culture, right? There's so many different ways that I can find the root of this problem, which is going to give me the answer. So what is the habit that I have developed? I overstudy,
Mm.
right? I turn every single rock. So yes, I may go in and be the most prepared person in the room, but then I have received feedback of like, you are making too many points. You have to decide which point is important. It's like, so it's like you try to overcompensate,
Yeah.
and maybe your overcompensation is still not enough because you went too far. So it's like there is never the right answer, or like you can never get it right when you have the imposter syndrome, right? You over prepare, and then you're punished for over preparing.
Yep.
As I grow in my career, what I'm trying to arrive at a place where maybe I have a lot of strategic skills, right? I don't need to like, obviously you always need to continue searching for new strategic skills and new things of learning. But maybe what I really, really need to learn is how to be a better executive, how to be a better manager, how to
Mhm.
be a better visionary, how to make better relationships. And I think that's a reflection of the imposter syndrome, of like I needed to overcompensate as it comes to strategy. So I'm going to consume all these strategy books and articles and movies and like TED Talks that I possibly can on a strategy. But now this left me exposed to, oh, maybe I'm not the best person in building relationships with people up and down. So those are part of our growth. I find that it's very much a reflection of you feeling at some point that you're not good enough to be at the table.
Yep. And what moment did you experience the worst imposter syndrome for you
Oh,
in your career, or in your life, or whatever? so people can feel, um, they can see that someone at your level can still experience it, and they can still succeed to get to your point even with imposter syndrome.
Wow, there are many. But the one that comes to my mind right now, it was I was running a messaging workshop for a pretty big insulin client, and that specific brand was in trouble because they had a specific competitor that it was coming to market, and they were very nervous and they wanted to refresh their messaging. And I wasn't easy because I haven't um, ran a message workshop to that degree up to that point. I have done message workshops before, but this was one, like you can imagine, there was like 25 clients in the room, every single level up and down. And and I went in and I was very nervous the entire time. And I was like, that workshop probably cost the clients, the agency probably charge $100,000 easily. And I now knowing the price tag of this work session, I'm in front of this room and I'm just like, and I can feel like I'm not doing what I think it could be the best. Like all I can think about is like somebody else can do this so much better than I. And but I did the entire workshop, and I remember my account partner giving me a real hard time before going in the workshop, which really contribute to those feelings of not being the right person to run that room. And I wrote the output report because that's what we do in when we run workshops, right? Just like these are the learnings. And he gave me a really incredible hard time. I look it back, there was like 10 versions because every time I sent it to him, he would make a comment and I would make his comment and was never good enough. And at some point he made a decision to not share with the client.
Ah, man.
And that really hurt me.
I'm sure.
And a few months later, I was asked off the business and I was incredibly upset. But I'm going to tell you, I go back to that report. Obviously, I still have a copy of the report. That was one of the best output reports I ever wrote. And as now, 10 years later, still like in the business, running message architectures, workshops, it was a phenomenal workshop. But at that moment, and with the people around me not really giving me the support that I needed, I felt like I wasn't the right person in the room.
Yeah. So you're besides feeling the imposter syndrome, you felt like it was elevated or escalated or made worse because people around you, not knowing that you're dealing with this imposter syndrome, just didn't support you the way that a team member should in any job. But specifically in marketing and advertising, I think team
Oh,
is one of the
absolutely.
core things that we need.
Oh,
Teammates.
yeah. Your team can make or break you. And not only the work, but also the emotional support that you get from the team is fundamental for the success. And I just remember being in the situation where I was new to this client, was new to this category. One of the things that I learned about diabetes was that people are diabetes lifers, right? In our industry, that's how they do most of their lives. And coming to that situation, it was, I felt very, very, very vulnerable, and I didn't get the support from the team, which really made the imposter syndrome even bigger. And as I look back at that experience, I can't think about anything that I would do differently at that point in time because that's what that's who I was, and that's the things I had.
So, would it be safe to say that that experience was definitely your worst, but maybe your best because of what came after and how it prepared you later on?
It was definitely the worst. I don't know if it's the best, but definitely I think you learn a lot from the situations, right? I had another experience where somebody said, "Oh, you're not advertising material." It's like, you know what? Go where the sun doesn't shine, because that was really not fair. But those experiences really contribute to it, right? And it gives you that drive to believe in yourself when before anybody else believes in you.
Yeah. What was your what was the most pivotal moment in your career that just changed everything?
Oh,
And
wow.
take your
That's
time to think about it. There could be a couple, but one that just instantly comes to your head, to your mind.
Oh, coming to the United States, that's definitely the pivotal time. It's one of those forks in the road where it's like if you go here, you have a very different life than if you go here. Not only the life that I live, but also professionally, because what drove me to the United States was my ambition to have a really nice and brilliant career. Had I stayed in Brazil or decided to go back to Brazil after year one or two, I would have a very different life. I would probably working at agencies in Brazil, probably the affiliates of the main agencies that we have here in New York.
Mm.
Um, but it's very difficult to know, like, would I be able to succeed in Brazil? We spoke about Brazil being a very patriarchal society. I don't know. It's hard to tell, right?
Mm.
Like you can know what is the life not lived. That is for me the most pivotal decision that has changed my professional career.
That's amazing. Yeah, it could have had totally different implications. Also,
Completely different.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely people that see that as a value, and then there's people that don't, and they make do what they have. But then there's people that just can't have that opportunity that you had to come here, or to be fair, to any country that has more opportunity than their current country. So, good for you, and we're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
But in that light, can you tell the listeners 1 to 5 things, and it's up to you how many you want to say, that are essential in terms of career, just in career, or in terms of marketing advertising that is essential for succeeding?
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's think about the most important things for you to succeed in advertising and marketing range. I think the first one is you have to be curious. You have like you can't sit and wait for the news. You can sit and wait for your boss to tell you what to do. You have to be curious. And curiosity means trying a new social media and thinking out the implication for your clients, or reading an article and trying to think about how that reflects a specific thinking that you had a few weeks ago, right? So I think curiosity is very important. That very easily fits in the next one, which is like, you don't know anything. You really don't, right? Like, be humble. You don't know anything. Continue learning and read and learn and read everything you can, right? It's not because I'm a senior person that I would be ashamed of joining a basic strategy training, right? Because there is always a different way of thinking that you may not ever have been exposed. Um, be flexible. Things are not necessarily the same way every single time. And this flexibility is what makes bringing these different experiences and finding different solutions viable, right? Being flexible, I don't mean like accommodating. I mean flexible in your thinking, being open to the decisions that you've made in the past worked, but the decisions that you make now may not be may not work, right? Like Who Moved My Cheese is the best book ever written, right? Because that's for me, it's like the little mice that is willing to think differently is the mice that gets fed. So what else? Be curious, be flexible, be learning. Two more things.
You don't have to do two more things if you don't want to.
Well, I have one more at least. You gotta be a hardworking.
Absolutely.
This industry is not an industry that is very accommodating of if you're not a hardworking. And I know sometimes people take it for granted, but when I mean be a hardworking, it's like you gotta be in it. And I'm not talking about working from 9 to 9. That's not what I'm talking about, which happens, as we know. We may work long hours, but it's not about the long hours, but it's about to put yourself into the work, because that's what makes great work, right? Passion is what, and enthusiasm is what makes great work. So that is about being a good worker. And I mean, being a hardworking, right? If you're a person that is going to do your 9 to 5, count your minutes, and can wait to be out of there, you're not going to go very far in this industry. So I guess that's why people like me with a lot of passion can go further, because I put a passion on everything I do. I put passion on work. I put passion in passion. I put passion in food. I put passion in friends and relationships.
Yeah.
That's who I am. And you gotta be willing to deal with the dysfunction a little bit, right? Things they're not fitting in boxes in advertising. Like, people are emotional. That's why they're creative, right? In order to be creative, you have to be in touch with your emotions. So emotions sometimes can make things a little dysfunctional. So you have to be willing to go with it. Sometimes I'm not, and and that can be painful.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of the points that you said anyway translate to general like career stuff. I know for me personally, one thing I got called out early on in my life was I always packed up my things earlier than I should have. So basically, when I saw the time was 5, 10 minutes left, I would start putting my books away, or start preparing to leave. And then as soon as that time hit, I would leave. And if we were in meetings, I would have my stuff packed and just kind of show to those that the person speaking, hey, I'm ready to go, so finish up. So someone called me out on it, and it was a very high person at Columbia who talked to me. That's when I was at my Columbia program, and they're like, Dr. Nobody, you can't do that. It's disrespectful, it's rude, and it shows that you don't care. And that totally changed the way I do things. Now that we work virtually, most people do, it's harder, but I just leave my green, like, we work on Teams, so I leave my green icon on to show people, hey, I'm still on, just in case, but really hoping that no one ever messages me.
Yeah, it's incredible. These experiences, like the one you just described, those early experiences in your career, really shape your career throughout. I remember my very first meaningful job in Brazil before I came to the States. I was a senior, and I already had this full-time job, which was really really incredible. I was very lucky to have that job. And because I was new and I wanted to make an impression, somebody was presenting something. And I don't even remember what I said, but I just remember I said something not very flattering to the project. I made a criticism. And there was maybe 10 people in the room. The presentation went on. The director let everybody go. And the presentation was given by a peer. Maybe she was 1 or 2 years more senior than I, but she was a peer. And he let everyone go, asked me to stay behind. And he looked at me very seriously and he said, Caroline, if you don't have anything to fix the problem, don't highlight the problem.
Whoa. Wow.
And I remember, I was already very scared of him because he was like this very scary director, and I was like this very, very puppy junior person. But so he was already very serious, and he made an extra effort to be extra serious. But I'm going to tell you, like, that totally killed my week. But it stayed with me because I'm now very conscious. I was very young. I was maybe 20, maybe 21. I'm very conscious that when I'm going to highlight a problem, when I'm going to criticize a problem in a project that we are working together, I try to bring a solution to the table at the same time. It may not be a good solution, but it shows that I'm willing to contribute to the project in a positive way. And if I identify the problem and I don't have any solution to give, I put a disclaimer. I'm going to highlight this problem, and I'm sorry I don't have a solution to give, but I will sit with you and think about a solution for this problem that I'm going to highlight. But that made me a much better collaborator.
So eventually we're going to have another person for marketing advertising, Amanda. She was my boss when I joined advertising world, and she almost basically said what you just said to me is, if you have nothing to say, if you just don't say anything, then don't, just leave it blank or don't even make a comment to it. So meaning in our agency world, when we're looking at certain pieces, at least for the medical people, we're trying to make sure it's medically accurate. But not every time we're the ones creating that content. We're reviewing it to make sure for its accuracy. So there's times where I'll get it and they're telling me, hey, look this over. Can you give us a comment, or, whatever suggestion you have? So if I have nothing to say, I won't say anything. But if I do have something to say and I highlight it, like to your point, you better say something that's productive. Even if it's not the best answer, at least it's flagged and you're showing that you're making an effort to change it and to help, because that can actually stimulate someone to be like, hey, actually, I was thinking that same thing. I didn't like that part. Maybe I'll rewrite it or do something else or add something. So it's amazing how two different mentors can say the same thing. And it's affected, obviously, my whole career of my 4 years in marketing advertising, still in the infancy phase, but definitely it's good advice in general.
It is. But you see, Dr. Nobody, we've experienced in our job with a client where we brought a scientific solution and another doctor has told us, you can't do it. And this other doctor has not contributed to the solution. And now you and I are stuck, right? We can go forward because this other doctor, who doesn't work for us, is simply saying, this doesn't work, it's broken, but it's not giving us a different way of thinking about the solution we're trying to bring to the table. So it's not productive.
Yeah, it's never productive in any case, in any situation. Yeah, that story you're referring to, that situation is current and is very frustrating. So yes, Caroline and I have worked on that project together, and it's ongoing, but to be determined. But
to be determined.
Yeah. So before we start wrapping it up, I want to ask you: do you want to share, or do you have anything else that you want to tell the audience, the listeners, something important that's always left with you, in addition to what you've already said? Because to be honest, you've said so many good things that I'd be amazed if you have more, and actually we would appreciate that, because this has been so amazing of an interview. But I want to give you an opportunity to freestyle whatever you want to say right now.
Oh, freestyle is hard, right? Oh my God. I guess there's so many things. It's like, first of all, I guess if you're thinking that you have imposter syndrome, you are not. Just by having the thought, you're not. And obviously, this is advice I give to myself all the time and works sometimes and other doesn't, right? If you're thinking, I don't belong to this room, I don't belong to this conversation, it you definitely do because you're being incredibly self-conscious, right? Is that for me is the same parallel. Like if you think you're not gonna be a good parent just by the thought of you not being a good parent, you're gonna be a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same story here, right? If you think you're imposter, you definitely not. Um, but hey, I'm imposter. I feel like imposter every day when I'm talking in a meeting, when I'm, even though like sometimes I have people that are more senior than and I know more about a specific subject than everyone in the room, and I get trumped. I feel like I don't belong in that room.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always with you. So that's the first thing. How you get over this damn imposter syndrome
Yes,
is
please.
allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And it's a really crazy advice, right? Yeah. But you can only grow your confidence if you expose yourself to your vulnerabilities. Because if you only do the things that you're confident, you're going to go confident only in those 4 or 5 things that you do. But you're always going to have new things, especially in advertising and marketing. There's always a new problem. There is always a new curveball that you never saw before. If you're not comfortable in being vulnerable, you're going to always feel like an imposter. So I still feel like an imposter myself, but I'm going to tell you, I feel less of an imposter today than I did 10 years ago because I allow myself to be vulnerable. Like I was at some point, I have never worked in oncology, and oncology was incredibly scary for me because my BA is in advertising and marketing. And I'm very grateful for having wonderful partners like yourself that really dominate the science and really understand the things I'm trying to do. But you can't be with me all the time, Dr. Nobody. So I am in a room sometimes by myself, and not dominating that science makes me feel vulnerable, right? But I feel less vulnerable today than I did 10 years ago. And that just happened because I allow myself to be vulnerable. But back to the oncology story, that for me is the biggest level of science I could possibly imagine at that time. That here comes the speech for oncology, Caroline. You got to take it. It's like, man, I cannot take it. I am the wrong person to take it. But I also didn't feel like I could say no. And it was one of my favorite scientific brands that I ever worked on. I went in, we pitched, we won, and it was really fun to work on. And that really helped me overcome this fear of science. But if I haven't done that, if I haven't allowed myself to be vulnerable, I wouldn't find confidence to take on another oncology pitch had to come. So I think that's the main message. How to get over imposter syndrome, embrace the vulnerability. That's the only way to grow your confidence.
I'm not trying to be tacky here, but you blew my mind. That's like totally solid advice, and it makes so much sense. It really does, and I appreciate you really bringing this whole interview to that one line statement. So it's amazing, and I really hope the listeners really embrace that, because imposter syndrome shows its face way sorry it shows its face in different ways, and everybody experiences it differently, and it's
For
recognizing
sure.
it and then doing what Caroline said is embracing the vulnerability about it, and then you grow. I love it. It's so good. I can't wait to put it on the website, and we could talk about it more then.
Will be fun.
Yeah, definitely. Um, thank you, Caroline, so much for your time. You gave us so many great insights, and you dropped definitely a bunch of knowledge bombs on us. And we appreciate you sharing your story, your experience, and definitely we'll be reaching out to you again for our second part to talk about marketing advertising in a little more depth, because that's the goal. It's not just to talk about our stories and these conditions, but also talk about opportunities that other people can have, irrelevant to their degrees they have, because there's so many jobs for marketing advertising.
Oh my God, so many jobs.
Too many. I
Too
couldn't.
many jobs. We have many openings. Come work with us. Uh,
There you go.
we are hiring. No, I would love to. And it's like I really geek out in talking about the fundamentals of advertising and marketing and case studies. I absolutely love, to a point that some other people that work for me has told me many times that I should go teach. And
There you go.
but I like in a college environment, it just, because I feel like an imposter, I don't feel like I can go in and teach anybody. But I love geeking out about the books that I've read.
Well, I know you've mentioned that, and we will definitely be asking you on the side about those books, websites, anybody who you suggest that people should listen to or read about, because I think that's an essential thing in careers in general, is to expand, be curious, learn everything that you've been talking about, and it starts with that. It doesn't matter if you take the physical book, like us, old school. I like the physical. I can't do ebooks. That's weird for me. I like to have a nice
Yes,
collection, look like I
me too.
was actually smart. But
I like hugging my books.
Yeah. I like the smell of a new book that hasn't been opened yet.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
Those are good times. But I will reach out and we'll put that on the website. But Caroline, again, thank you so much. The listeners can reach out to you through LinkedIn, correct?
That's right. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Caroline Cunha, and you spell Cunha Cunha. And Caroline, the old-fashioned way, Caroline. The Cunha Cunha.
Excellent. And that will be on the website too. Listeners, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you gained a lot of insights today from Caroline's experiences. And that's the whole point. It's just learning from others. Nobody's like us that just succeed eventually. So if we can do it, definitely you can. This is just the beginning. For sure. Yeah.
For sure.
Just the beginning of becoming someone, but specifically the someone you always wanted to be. I hope you enjoyed the episode, because I sure did. I definitely learned things. But please do give a like, review, and subscribe, and visit the website, drnobodypodcast.com, where we turn nobodies to somebodies. Talk to you soon.